All right. Good afternoon, good night, good evening. Let's do a follow up from yesterday. So, yesterday we were looking for completion of this deep crab. We didn't quite get it. We pushed back overnight. We did set up this pattern here, which was basically a Gartley that turned into a crab. And you can look at the tolerances on the Gartley here. All right, we got into that tolerance, got down through, basically almost touched the 786, came back up, rejected, and tried to pull this thing into a crab. So the completion of this crab was within the completion range of the crab from yesterday. Beautiful. The 1902 for that crab was a bit deeper. All right, so we'll start off, we'll go back and do a bit of replay here. We'll go back before 9:30 and we will knock these out here. All right, so let's take a look at the overnight setup here. All right, so looking at the overnight setup, excuse me, here is our data that we were looking at yesterday. Similar, right? But it's a different setup today. So what we notice is that, again, most likely at the open, we are going to get a pull. Again, it doesn't mean it's going to happen, but most likely we're going to get some downside into basically the first 30 minutes, maybe hour or so, and then try to reverse. All right, so that's what we're looking for then. But we've got this crab completion, and we have some other data that really tells us this market's going to want to pump a bit. All right, so the first thing that we want to look at is this number right here, this 86.05%. All right, what is that telling us? That's telling us that there is an 86.5% chance that we are going to get back to this target here. Now, something that's very interesting we'll get into later. We'll see if it ends up working out into the close, but so then we will bounce back over and we will scroll down and we will look at midnight. 88.37% chance to get back to midnight, which is way up here. All right, so that's another, again, doesn't mean we're going to. All right, so if we pull back again and we look, the middle of the 12-hour has a 93% chance. The low side of the 12-hour has a 90% chance. It sounds a bit wonky because that's telling us that even though the market's hitting these targets, it's not always structured exactly like this. So we'll get into that again in a minute. But so what that's telling us is we have a 90% chance to get back here. And then we have a basically 93% chance to get back here. So that's going to be targets for today. All right, and our high side, so our high of day, our initial overnight high of day, if we scroll back up here, is going to be in this range right here. It got hit roughly around this time, around 2100. But it would seem that if we're going to go knock out additional highs, which we could, they're going to be around the open, 1030, which means we were, as this data started to lull, this data was going to take over. We were going to possibly pump to go to try to go take out the high. And then possibly again, we'll fight for it at the close of day, right? Because we have high and lows around the close of day. Now there's other stats that we can play too, but for now, these are all we're going to look at. You have 1400 candle stats that we return to. You have a bunch of stuff. So interestingly enough, the previous day that we have that set up almost exactly like this was 5/15/2020. And this is what it looks like. All right, so that gives us a pretty good idea of what the day could possibly look like. And if you notice, one of my favorite things about harmonics is that you get a harmonic on this side and you get a harmonic on this side to set up the larger pattern. Always fun. Now, we're going to bounce over here and we're going to look at this little stat right here, this 100%. There's only 13 days that have set up exactly like today, but with the with the additional piece of information that New York opened beneath Asia and London. All right, so that's a very important thing to understand. And on every single one of those days since 2008-ish, 100% of those returned to this target right here. 100% of them so far. Does that mean we're going to do it today? No. But it means that we're probably going to try pretty hard if we don't. And that's what you'll notice. If we don't hit these stats, because they're 80% and 90%, right? They're not usually 100%. But you'll notice if you don't get to them, rarely is it for lack of trying. So, all right. So let's look at this. We've got the completion of this pattern right here, right? We've got this pattern, like we said, that's set up to the downside here to give us this pull. Now, again, into the open, we don't want the market to leave without us, right? So into the open, we're looking to start building our position to the upside. What is the ultimate low side we're willing to play? Well, you have this big pattern right here. It's not, we're not going to necessarily call it a pattern, but we're looking at the 886 of this. Once we start crossing the 886 of this, now we're going to be looking to go sweep, possibly reject, maybe come back up, and that's where it gets a little bit shady. So if we can bounce in any of these zones here, or sweep them and then bounce, that's what we want. All right. So we will get rid of that because I know we didn't get down there to the 886. So we have the open coming up now. Now, some of this data is already there, but it's just going to be what it is. But as we open, we start building our position. As we start polishing off this pattern and we get down through this 1618, so the first add or the first entry is going to be down here on the completion of this crab here. So that's where we catch it. All right. Then as we continue to come down, we get our adds into our low of day zone. And then any sweeps, we look for a setup to continue, and we can try to build something additional if we want to. But, which we did sweep it, right? So now, what do we want to see? As we've always talked about, I say always, but as we've talked about, we want to see a pattern set up. What does that pattern look like? Well, we're looking to try to start finding some holding or possibly sweeping and then starting to build a pattern back to the upside. All right, and here is our setup. Now, the interesting thing about this is I'm not the biggest fan of these types of reversals, but they do look better on a 10-minute chart. So this hold right here looks better on a 10-minute chart. This one right here looks better on a 5-minute chart. Right, so if we swap, right, you get that nice hold, and you get the hold within the wick, and then you get the move back into the 930 zone, which I've talked about, a million times, the 930 zone. And this is today's 930 zone. So if we look at previous days' 930s, which we could, right, they're all around us. We pulled into one of them. We held one, which is perfect. All right. So now what are we looking for? Well, we're going to go back to our data, and we're going to look at, for what we call the New York 1 session, we're going to look at what are the chances of it being what we call false. Oh, come on. There we go. So the chances of becoming false are 80%. All right. So what that's telling us is we have an 80% chance to get back to this target here. All right. So this target is 24,645, 24,645, 25. All right. So let's do. All right. So now if we start measuring out this pattern, we can flip over to a lower time frame if we need to kind of make it look better. So if we start measuring out these patterns, where's our 1618 take us? This is the first place I wanted to see rejection. This is a selling imbalance on a footprint if you pay attention to that. It's perfect. All right. And where is, so here, upwards of this target right here to the squeeze out the 1902, that's going to be our targets, right? So our first target is going to be to turn this market what we called false, which all of this is in the same area. So we're going to want to take a large portion of our trade on this completion, right? So we know that we could possibly squeeze out this higher target up here, this one that was more like 100%. Great. But I mean, for me, I'm looking to take a majority of my position because here I am with an average cost of here, right? So this is what, 200 handles away. So 200 handles is plenty for a day. So we set up this pattern. If we swap back over to 5 minute, we'll probably get some more out of it if we move this up here. That 1618, yeah, it lines up with the low side of the 12-hour. So there's a lot of confluence in the low side of this 12-hour. We're going to find rejection in the selling imbalance because that's just how it works when you get selling imbalances. Okay, so we'll start playing through this a bit, get back up into the selling imbalance. Also, I think we talked about these lows of days. If we didn't, the initial low of day was here, but unfortunately it was below the deep crab completion, or sorry, above the deep crab completion. So we knew if we were going to pull down, we were probably going to try to dip into this additional low of day zone. I'm not sure if I mentioned that at the open, but this is just a bit of a recap and a talk through the recovery of this pattern. So so here we are. So let's keep playing through it. We're on 1 minute because it kind of shows us where we get these rejections in this, you know, this area to turn it false, where the selling imbalance is up here. Right, so we come up, we try to take some of it out, we try to take some of it out, we can't, we keep rejecting. Right, and then what you want is a pop through it to go get your target. Right, target done. So majority of the position's gone here. So what are we holding for? Well, if we hold any more of our position, it's just to go get these additional targets to the high side. And where you take it from there is up to you. For me, I held on to barely a quarter of a position, and I ended up closing it because we didn't quite get up there and we pulled back, which was, it was expected to pull back, right? We expected a move to set up. So let's look at exactly what was setting up here. We had this move setting up right here to try to get another push to another 1618. Now, it was a bit of a wonky setup. I would probably get scalded by Carney if I were to call that a deep crab, but it's close. And then we start looking for, let's jump back over to the 5 minute here. Right, so what we're looking at here is we're starting to look at these setups. Now, this is starting to look, if it starts to pull, it's going to start looking like it will act like a shark. Now, why do I say this? Because if we jump over to the ES, if you watch multiple futures, you'll notice that what starts to happen is you've got a shark. Now, this is a bit, this isn't replaying, right? This is real life data. But if you notice where we are right here, it sets up this pattern here, which is a shark, right? It sets up this little shark here. You're looking for the 5-0, which you get, and then you get the rejection, right? Back in this blue box like we talked about yesterday. So when we get the rejection on that blue box and we start pulling back down, what are we looking for? Well, we're looking for the 886 or the 113. We know that we're probably going to come down, set up this shark on the ES. So what does that look like on the NQ? Well, it looks like a wonky little shark with only a 23% pullback that tried to continue. Okay, so this is why I watch multiple futures. And I start to see that set up. We start to pull back and we start to break through some of these other zones that I'm paying attention to. There was a buying imbalance right here. I was expecting the pull into the buying imbalance. It tried to hold, which is where the ES started to reject again. And we started to pull through it. And at this point, I wasn't really interested in holding it any longer. Now, I did hold it a little bit longer, and I'll tell you why. We were setting up a pattern here, right? We were setting up a Gartley. And this Gartley is It's unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, it's going to be more of an 886 move rather than a 786 move. And the reason for this is the 100% ABCD is under the 786. It's beyond it. So more than likely, you're going to try to pull into this 100% and then squeeze out the 886, which unfortunately gives the market opportunity to continue to drive down if it wants to, right? So, and that's what ended up happening. We ended up sweeping out this pattern. And when we did, we ended up setting up a crab pattern to the downside, right? So we ended up taking this pattern right here that was this Gartley, a special Gartley pattern, and we ended up extending it out down here to go close out the pattern. Now, what did that give us? Well, it gave us something that if you pay attention to the ES and the NQ, what you'll find, the NQ, it swept this area, held the 886 of this wonky, ugly little shark thing, where the ES swept it. And that, a lot of times, if you're looking for an additional drive up, is a great place to look for longs. So now what do we still have? We still have high side target data, right? We still got all this data up here that we haven't gone to get yet. And not saying that it will happen into the close or before the close, but if it does, fantastic. If not, it's not impossible that we'll sneak up there and get some of these overnight. But I'm trying to think if there's anything else on this. There doesn't really seem to be. Yeah, I mean, that's really all I have for a follow-up. So let's knock some of these things out and look at the chart and make sure. Yeah, I mean, it's all a lot of the same stuff we talked about yesterday, just in the other direction. Because we were looking, we had such a high chance of a push toward these targets that it was pretty ridiculous not to take them, especially since we had the completion of this pattern. Even though we still pulled through it and squeezed through it, and we pulled through and squeezed through the low side of this, what happened? We started getting down here, the market started to pull, and then they released the housing data early. 10 minutes early, they released the housing data. Why do you think that is? It's kind of interesting when that stuff happens, especially when the market's moving to the low side or it's moving, away from where somebody might want to take positions. Now, I mean, that's a bit of conspiracy, but it's just what it is. But when you hear those things on news squawks, they don't release those things early by accident typically. So this is where, if you're looking to build that position, for me, I was pretty confident at that point when they released it early. They were trying to pump the market because the existing home sales came in higher than what they'd expected. So anyway, we'll see if we get back up here. We'll see if we can go recover these targets up here. And if we can, great. And if not, it's just another day in trading. So hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody had a good day, and I will see you later.